webinar where we're kind of summarizing where we are and how we got there in terms of ORLs. And then, Dave, you might have some other points.
Good morning, Karen and Tom. The only other thing I can think of right now is that I've been talking about ORLs a little bit with other private sector organizations, and the reaction's been great. I mean, it's been, after they understand what it's about, their reaction has been, well, we want to be an ORL 1. So I think this is really a good sign because there hasn't been any other kind of data standard for usability or operational readiness level out there. So in the private sector that I've talked to for folks, they feel very strongly that they could be ORL 1s and want to be represented as that when the time comes for them to offer their services. So I think we have some good momentum built up.
Very good. Yeah, and I think, Karen, if I'm not mistaken, the whole idea here isn't to necessarily rank 1 through 4. It's to provide a standard that people can improve with, and really define the differences between a 1 and a 4. Dave brings up a good point. People naturally revert back to, you know, it's like school, right? I got an A or a B or a C or a D, right? I think that messaging is important. We don't want people to feel that they're being, you know, devalued, but we want to provide a path forward to make it more reliable based on the standards you all have federated. Is that correct?
And it's also identifying or communicating the appropriateness of that data for a particular use case. So yeah, there really is no shame in being an ORL 2. It's really a matter of how that data would be used and interpreted by the folks when it's being pulled in and used.
Okay.
And I would just add too, Tom, that people that are working on data services or they're working on the integrity of their data set itself that they think could be useful in decision making, you know, they may strive to be an ORL 4 as they're evolving the data from research into perhaps an operational setting, and they think the data set is going to be good enough for decision making. Well, the pathway for that may be, in essence, start at a 4, go to a 3.
Right.
That kind of stuff.
Okay. For those of you on the screen, I'm on slide 6 that shows the high-level summary of an operational readiness level 1 through 4. And for those of you that are new, this whole standard was developed because as we started doing data-driven decision-making, we had lots of data. We couldn't tell what was reliable, what was less reliable, what really wasn't reliable. And this standard was developed by NASA, was a 9-level standard that was reduced down to 4. So that was the whole purpose of this. And the idea of a federated standard is basically all the folks involved, public, private, federal, state, local, agree to agree and have a brush on the canvas. So this is a very fast way to get things done in lieu of a formal NIST standard that takes a lot more time and so forth. On slide 7, you'll see we have put the ORL levels on the Regional Common Operating Picture dashboard. We will also have those within the SISE Appstore. So the idea is to label each product, each data set, whatever, as close as we can to an ORL level. And again, 1 through 4 is the ranking. 4 doesn't mean it's bad. It just means, you know, be aware you're swimming at your own risk. Sometimes 4 might be crowdsourced, or it might be a distributor of data that they do not own. So is somebody forwarding information that isn't theirs? We have to factor that in because during the recent storms, and I know Jeff, you and Jim and a lot of folks in the electric sectors, a lot of information gets forwarded around. Greg and I talk about this all the time. It's a big issue for DHS as well because when you get forwarded information, you have to spend time of, okay, who sent it? Is it their data or someone else's data? Do I get 15 copies of the same thing? You know, those kinds of things. So this is kind of what we're looking to take on as we go forward here. Any comments on this? Okay.
Hey, Tom, it's Carrie. I wanted you to know that I was on.
Oh, hey, Carrie. Very good. Great timing. So I'm going to turn the microphone over to you, Carrie. The idea here was I sent out a draft. I made some edits to the draft document you and Chris approved. Up on the screen, I'll have on slide 8. We'll have, I've got the bullets up there kind of lifted out of the document, the ORL GIS work group, purpose and so forth out of the document. So, Carrie, why don't you, we have some new folks on the call today. Why don't you just brief them on the purpose of this, how you used this during Florence, and maybe what your hope is for this group as we start pulling this together?
Absolutely. So just to kind of give a background on how we used the ORLs during Florence, we kind of did I don't want to call it a pilot because it was used in an operational setting, but it was the first time that the levels had actually been implemented during an actual event. So we had discussed doing this back in June on the Duke Energy side. We had a storm summit in Charlotte. We kind of made plans, but it was during Florence that we actually rolled these out. And I did a presentation a couple weeks ago, I think, on this call that kind of talked about the lessons learned from that. One of the biggest lessons learned was that it was actually almost more helpful for us on the data analysts and GIS side, because as we were going through the process of breaking certain data sets, it kind of forced us to ask questions about whether or not it was even appropriate to use in our application, whether or not the data made sense. So it was very effective, and we still want to move forward with figuring out the best way to train the end users on it and to communicate the value. So Tom and I had discussed months ago standing up a GIS work group, and the purpose of the work group would be to bring together people with a GIS background from multiple companies and to work together to figure out what's the best way to implement this model cross-sectionally, because right now we have something set up at Duke Energy, but that doesn't mean that's going to work everywhere. So we have some end goals in mind, but we're really targeting people that have a strong development and GIS background to kind of help brainstorm the best way to implement these. So the first couple meetings will certainly be kind of high-level discussion, and then hopefully we'll kind of get down to the weeds of implementation down the line. So Tom, I don't know if that is a good enough overview.
Yeah, Carrie, maybe just take a second. How did this help during Florence? Can you give us a story, or how did this help you guys produce better information products for decision making, and did it impact decision making?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on it before, but I'll go into a little bit deeper. As we would ask for data, people would come up to us and say, hey, can you guys have this data set or find it somewhere and add it to our storm application? Before we implemented this, we would have, frantically Googled around and found it, or called a friend and found the data set, and we would have just added it. The problem with that, and we've talked about this a lot, when you add data to an application that's being used during an event, you're essentially responsible for that data, and it becomes a liability if you don't know where the data came from, or you don't know how frequently it's being updated, or if it's being updated at all. And the not knowing is the scary part. So us having to go through each time someone requested that we add a certain data layer to the app, we would go through and we would rank it on the ORL scale. And the process of doing that, even though it did, it added time. It added a time to our process, and it wasn't as rapid. It led us to ask questions about the data that we wouldn't have asked if we hadn't gone through that process. And actually, there were a couple data sets that we ended up not adding because we didn't feel comfortable with putting them in. And we're really thinking hard about... Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
Can you give me an example? You didn't feel comfortable. Can you give me an example of what was not
Yeah. So the flood data, that product that we had discussed, the VIIRS flood modeling, that was a data set that I was really impressed with and I thought was really promising. But the problem is that it was complicated to explain to the end users, especially on the fly, without doing a training, and we didn't want to confuse anybody. So as we were going through and ranking it, and it's kind of in a development phase, is my understanding. So as we were kind of ranking it, we thought, you know what, I think while this is an interesting data set, I think it might confuse the users if we added this in so last minute. That's just an example of, even when data sets don't rank low, they may rank it a 3 or a 2, but the process kind of forces you to face whether or not that data set is even, whether it fits the use case of your application, whether it will be understood by the end user, all of those things. So I hope that answers your question.
Carrie, that's awesome. Hey, Greg McShane, any thoughts about what Carrie just said? I thought that was an interesting perspective. Any thoughts from your standpoint at DHS around whether to use?
Yeah, absolutely. We're working a number of issues, I won't say issues, but efforts. The Data Integration Task Force, we're actually rewriting our data framework within NPPD. So that's an effort that's going on right now. I'm very focused in on the operational elements of how we can apply this in an operational environment. We're working, this through some of our, I want to call it situational awareness tools or dashboards that we create. And it's very important to us because a lot of previous response and recovery efforts, we have a lot of great data, but it goes into our reports, and when we break this out and share the information, a lot of questions come back is, what's your confidence in your recommendation or based off of this data that's coming in? And it's becoming quite an issue. I mean, even when we ran into, I think it was last year's hurricanes, we, in our reporting out to the fields, our regional folks would get this report and say, hey, you know what, this is really good data, but where's the source coming from so I can validate this in the field? So what we're working on, and I've been actually talking quite a bit with Dave Jones on this and sharing some of, as we write up our data quality standards, this fits right into what we're doing here with this ORL effort, and we really like what we're seeing. So
Very good. Let me open up for comment from some of the other work group members. Jeff Placas, any thoughts from your perspective at PSE&G?
No, I think it all sounds good. I do have a couple of comments, but I'll hold them till the end. We had our North Atlantic Mutual Assistance group semi-annual meeting this past week up in Niagara Falls, and there was some information that we provided to the participants that I want to share, but I'll share them later on, so just give me a couple of minutes at the end of the agenda just to talk about it.
Okay, sounds great. Jim Nowak?
Yeah, Tom, I really don't have a lot to say. I've been listening. Of course, we've been discussing this for several weeks, and as part of the ORL committee, it's just a great opportunity to just put the data into the hands of the people who make the decisions and give them a sense of the level of accuracy of the data so that they can make a quick decision and move on.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jim. Tony Hurley, any thoughts or comments on that?
The industry keeps advancing, and I'm just sitting back with all these examples that they're sharing, thinking what the cascading impact would be not having this information. So I think it's all great. Again, as a field operator, when you can get that data, you can make operations and restoration decisions and planning decisions. It's very easy to see what the restoration and also the financial impact is of this information. So good stuff. I wish I had it when I was still with the utilities.
Very good. Thanks, Tony. Mike Mingus or Gail? Any comments from EI's perspective?
Hey, Tom. No, I agree with everybody, and not sure if it was Nowak or Jeff that mentioned it, but I think the integrity of the data, making sure that the utilities know that this is a vetted, trusted source and it's reliable data. I think it's great. It's going to help the industry, and looking forward to seeing it.
Great, thank you. Gail?
I don't have any other comments. Thanks.
Okay. Did I miss anyone in private sector? I think I got everybody. The idea here was we want to extend an invitation to the private sector GIS folks, which we'll do today. Now that we've had Carrie provide a brief, we have a draft letter. The idea is we will convene a committee.
Chris McIntosh.
Hi, Chris. Good morning. The idea we're just discussing the ORL GIS work group. So the work plan. I'm going to have you provide comment, Chris, in just a second. The idea here is that Chris McIntosh, who just dialed in, is going to help me facilitate it. The idea is to have 6 calls with these people, get them up to speed, and see if we can come up with a use case or 2. If we can't, we shut it down. If we can, we'll continue going. The idea is to work that issue across multiple electric utilities and maybe a food or telecom sector. Find the best practices that we can use going forward, and then leverage that with Greg McShane at DHS, who also wants to adopt and adapt that into the NIC framework within DHS's information sharing piece. So Chris McIntosh just joined us. Chris, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to provide comment on where you think or where you hope the GIS work group is going to go based on your experience of working within the GIS community. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. So, GIS, there's so many things that you can do. It's often hard to figure out what you should do and coordinate what you will do.
Hey, Chris, I'm sorry, Chris. Hey, Chris, I'm sorry. We got some new folks on the call. Can you just give everybody 30 seconds of your background so they know who's talking? Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, good idea. Good morning, Chris McIntosh. I'm formerly the Chief of Operations for Virginia's Emergency Operations Center and Virginia's State Interoperability Coordinator. After those tours, I went over to the private side and ended up running the public safety industries at Esri for the last 4 years. About a year ago, I left Esri and started my own consulting firm focused on how to actually help people use all the technologies and tools in public safety and related industries that they have available to them, so that GIS, that's things like FirstNet, that's the rise of apps, the Internet of Things, it's all these things that people are struggling with. How do I cobble them together to create a capability that helps me perform my operation? So that's my background of kind of become a subject matter expert on the application of technology to safety and security workflows.
Great. Thank you,
Good
Chris.
enough, Tom?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Go ahead. Yes.
Sure. And so, along that line, GIS, I often call, when I talk to folks about what today's GIS is, it's like the old box of Legos that we used to get when I was a kid, not the little kits with the directions how to put something specific together, but the big tub that just has all the different pieces, but your imagination drives how you put it together. That's what many of the GIS applications are that are out there today. You have all these different kinds of blocks, but no guidance on what you should do with them. And it becomes overwhelming, and it becomes difficult to coordinate when you have multiple organizations trying to collaborate. So that's where the scenario-based approach works really well. Find out a scenario or agree on a scenario, and then walk through what are the questions we need to answer, who are our stakeholders, what do the stakeholders need, what's the form factor that they need it in, what's the data that we need to provide that information to them, and that drives how you configure your GIS system, plural. So that's kind of the approach that we're going to take with this work group is get that big box of Legos down to a kit with some instructions that shows you how you build a better Millennium Falcon. I'm a Star Wars nerd. So that's what we're going to do is get a couple scenarios and use those scenarios to drive to agreement on these elements of information, and then how we're going to share those elements of information, and ultimately even what sort of information product that information is displayed to a decision maker, a non-technical person in, so that they can make better decisions during a crisis. That's the gist of what the working group is about. Hope you guys will join, and I look forward to robust conversations about this. It's a lot of fun when I do this. It's fun to see people argue about how they actually do business. That happens, and that's good because we're also talking a little bit about automating some processes, in this case information sharing processes, and you have to agree on the process before you can automate it. So that kind of dialogue is always a good thing. So I look forward to it. I appreciate the opportunity, and Tom, if you guys got any questions, back to you.
And Chris, one other question. Can you just talk about how, as this federates, what other groups you see pulling into this that can be part of this federated agreement in the GIS space?
Oh my gosh, yeah. The beauty, GIS is so much more than GIS. It's actually an interoperable communications capability when done right. So if you start branching out to all the industries that have a nexus to the utilities, you have emergency management, specifically public safety at large, other sectors that rely on utilities, healthcare. The possibilities are almost endless, which is why establishing governance over this is going to be so important because, and that's where I love the SISE. Because, and I told Tom when I first heard about the SISE, that you have solved the governance problem because you now have the people and the structure in place to decide the who, what, when, where, and why of information sharing. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, and someone's got to arbitrate that. Because the information could be shared with all of these dependent industries very easily. And so that's going to have to be managed. Emergency management's hungry for this specifically because often the causal event, the hurricane or the winter storm or whatever, is not the life-threatening emergency. The power being out is the life-threatening emergency. And that's what they're really worried about. That's why the state I came from, Virginia, it's mandated by statute that they exercise a large statewide power outage once a year because power being out is a life-threatening emergency, and so they're obviously very interested in closer coordination, collaboration with the utility sector, and need that. But you could go well beyond that as you start thinking through that.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris?
This is Karen. Just very interesting approach, and I just thought that the ability of using this kind of capability to insert the training for new data products that people offer up would be a really good outcome.
Karen, I love that. You're so spot on. Once we make progress on this, the sustainment is dependent upon training and exercises to maintain the robust capability as people turn over, as new technologies become available, as new data and information becomes available. That has to be a part of any process. The good news is with planning, it's very easy to do synthetic training and synthetic exercises that drive people to the tools that they use in a response. But that has to be a part of the program, and I'm really glad. Thank you for bringing that up because it is so important that we address that.
So, any other comments? Very good. Thank you, Chris. So, Chris, you and Karen set up beautifully our next agenda item, which is really the updates we've done to the Appstore, but more importantly, CATEX. So the CATEX exercise is really training on the operational use of certain products in a real world scenario. Okay, so I'm going to walk through this, but I want you to be thinking about, now that we have the technology built, if we come out with a new process or a new data set, we hold one webinar, and out of that webinar becomes our training, and we can have that training online within 1 hour of that webinar. The technology has become so simple now, and people are using more and more. They're using their mobile devices, so they're not reading long PDFs. So our approach to this is to use video capture, produce the training, and then have the training transcribed in written format after we produce the training in video format. So it's quick and it's fast, but I think, Karen, you and Chris have zeroed in on it. The training is the key. If people do not know the value of SISE, the value of the daily dashboard, the value of a product or a data set, they'll never put it into use. And if they can't link that usage to a real world scenario, like next week, if there's a storm, it becomes just another piece of noise. So let me move on to our discussion on the SISE Appstore. Major enhancements to the platform, the framework, and the layout for the SISE. So what we're going to ask all of you to do is to go to this web address, members.siseusa.org. You'll come to a web page that will say, don't have a SISE account yet or already have one. If you have not reestablished on the new platform, you'll have to recreate. I would just encourage you all to go through the recreation of it. So just hit don't have one and go through that process. You won't have to validate your identity with a $1.99 credit card charge on this one, but we want you to walk through that so you can see the registration onboarding process. When you come to the new App Store, what we've done is work with you all to put together a simpler layout. We're going to make it even simpler so that people can be no more than 3 clicks away from a solution they're looking for. So we have grouped items. We will have a section that is premium. We'll have a new thing down here is search by sector. So if I'm in a specific sector, I can click on that. It basically will cut to the chase and allow me to group solutions by sector. We're still working this, and you guys will all have us. But right here at the top, you'll see, for those of you that are on the call, for those of you who are not on the call, I am on slide 11. Okay. Well, before I go there, let me go to slide 10. We've divided this exercise into 3 tiers. The first tier is named at beginners and new users, which is a constant issue for everybody. We always have new people that come involved in an exercise or involved with the SISE or this consortium, have no idea of the names, the terms, the processes, the products, the acronyms. It's overwhelming. And I think we had a good exposure of that to some of the folks in September at our workshop, where we brought folks that are not familiar with any of this, and I think to a person, Mike Mingus, I think it was a bit overwhelming. So what we decided to do was to take and break CATEX down into 3 tiers. 1 is beginner, 2 is intermediate, and level 3 is for experienced users. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is our level 1, our tier 1 for new people, new users to the whole SISE piece. So as you go now to the App Store, there's a button there that you'll click on that says CATEX exercise. You click on that and a window appears that contains the CATEX exercise information. I'll go live on the screen. So I'm live now on the App Store. You click on that and the CATEX window appears and pushes the SISE App Store down. Why? We had a lot of complaints about going between websites. We had CATEX on one website, we had the App Store on another website. Now we put it all on one single platform. CATEX is integrated right into the App Store. So when you start the exercise, the windows come down. There's a video. You click whether you're a beginner or not, and you click go to the next one. And you can scroll. You never leave the App Store, right? No emails. We reduced 19 emails down to 0. Much more mobile friendly, and we want you to go through this. So right now the only option available is beginner. So if you click intermediate and advanced, you're going to go through the beginner steps. So we've done 3 injects. We put some videos in here for read ahead for people that aren't familiar with this. If you click on the next one, you'll go to a scenario video. You'll have actions to do that says here's a training video below that trains you on the product we're talking about, but the scenario introduces the real world application. I'll let you guys watch that. Then to participate, you scroll down into the App Store and you do your thing. When you're done, you come back up here, you click next step, and what we also have done is integrate a micro feedback component. Why did we do this? People can't remember by the time you get to the end of the exercise what the heck they were doing or talked about. So what we did is after each drill, we put in a simple button, clickable survey that can give us the information we need about the way we've presented the solution, the scenario. You scroll right through this, you click, 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 and you go to the next inject. And there's 4. And what we're focusing on for the inject are navigation, access to the SISE. Number 2, the use of the daily disaster dashboard, which is probably our most popular product we use during disasters, and Blue Sky Day as well. 3, we're looking at utilizing the Storm Central website. And then 4, we're going to use the Resource Central website, which has been completely revamped. Now we're adding data sets to this. But this is where we want to locate one place to find anybody that rents or sells anything the private sector needs during a disaster. So if I need industrial pumps, I'll click on this. A data set is loaded. This is a massive database, so we don't have it all in here, but we give you an idea of how we go about locating people that market, sell, rent this stuff. So we can zoom into any state. I think we've got several thousand of these in here, but you can find somebody. There's a phone number, you can call them. So that's our emergency resource app, if you will. Those are the 3 we're going to look at from the beginning standpoint. We wanted people to understand the process. What we'd like you all to do is to walk through this so that you can get a feel and provide us feedback on the exercise. So as I said before, let me find the slide here. Boom, 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 right here. So what we're requesting all of you, many of you have done this already, so if this is a repeat, don't worry about it, but we wanted you to go here to this web address, register, and then participate in CATEX. To get through CATEX, if you watch the videos, it's about 32 minutes. If you skip the videos and just do the exercise, it's about under 10 minutes. So keep in mind, this is aimed at brand new people that don't know what the Fleet Work Group is, they don't know what the SISE is, they don't know what the consortium is, they don't know the tools. So we wanted to, Chris, to your point, we wanted to create an automated mechanism that never sleeps, that's available 24/7, that people can come in and go through a process that helps them, that acclimates them to who we are, what we do, and what the SISE is. And it ties the product to real world scenarios, so it makes the connection in their brain. Oh yeah, if I want to find centralized declarations and waivers, I got 2 options to go to, right? Anyway, I just wanted to make sure we covered this today because we would like everybody to get through this over the weekend. And then we're going to go into our next phase of this as well. So far, we've had about 25 people walk through this. We got good feedback from them. And now we're going to open up to you all, to the whole work group. So let me pause for a minute and answer any questions you might have about your next steps. So I'll just go down the list. Mike, Gail, any comments or questions?
No, I'm going to be, signing up now for the CATEX exercise now, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Tom, I think the approach that you took this year on the different levels is going to be more meaningful, especially if you're a new person or a seasoned veteran with CATEX. So I think that will be a big enhancement.
Mike, I'm glad you brought that up. Part of our plan for the SISE is sustainment. And part of sustainment is having users have a really good experience on their first experience, right? So we collectively put a lot of energy to make sure that this is friendly to new people. So thank you for bringing that up. I appreciate that. Jim
No, I
Nowak?
think that's going to be a big win. So
Thank you.
good job.
Yeah, no, I want to thank everybody that helped out on that. Wonderful. Jim Nowak?
Comments? I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, very good. Tony Hurley? Okay, I'll come back. Nick Peak? All right, Karen Moe, comments?
You're right on about having that good experience starting out. So that's a great approach.
Great, thank you. Alexandra?
No comments, thank you.
Okay, Carrie Hicks?
No comments from me. Looking forward to it.
Okay, thank you, Carrie. Jeff Placus, any comments? Questions?
No, not specifically about this time. I think that the App Store approach is nice, simple, concise. The CATEX exercise, I started looking at it yesterday and then I realized, this is going to take a little bit more time than I have right now to do it. So I kind of backed out, paused it, and I'll get back into it when I have a few moments. But I did want to talk about a couple of other things, so just let me know when I can do that. I do want to address a couple of other items that came up.
Okay, well, as soon as we're done with feedback on this one, we can jump right into that, okay? Adam Barron, any comments or questions?
None at this time, thank you.
Okay, great, thank you. Greg McShane, comments, questions?
Nothing additional. This is great stuff. Let us know what else we can help you with from our end.
Okay, thank you. Gene Shear?
Yes, Tom, I was playing around with it a little bit before you started the tutorial. I'm going to go through the CATEX today, but it looks pretty exciting. Appreciate it, folks.
Great, thank you for the feedback, appreciate it. Stacy Neal, Virginia?
No comments. I'll log in and walk through the CATEX.
Okay, great. John Taylor, NIHS? Okay, Chris McIntosh.
Nothing to add. Looking forward to it.
Okay. Thank you. So what I want you to be thinking about as well, we're using the technology platform to conduct an exercise, but this is the same exercise. This is the same platform we're going to use to produce education on almost anything. Because the framework is already there, producing the content is very quick. And now that we have it, it's in place, we can use it for almost anything to educate people on any process or any data set or any anything. And once what I think is great, once it's there forever, right? It just sits there and allows people to come back and refresh and refresh. Jeff Placus brought up a great point. He gets through it, doesn't have time, has to jump out. It should bring you right back to where you left off, okay? If not, we put in forward, backward buttons so you can zoom past all the stuff and go right to where you are, or you can replay it as many times as you want. Anyway, so we're anxious to get your feedback. We put a lot of energy and investment into this, so we hope now there's no emails. It's all done in the App Store. You just scroll, and watch videos. Okay, pretty simple. So Jeff Placus, let me come back to you. You had some things you wanted to discuss here. Go ahead.
Sure. So really quick. So for those that don't know, there are a bunch of regional mutual assistance groups spread out across the country, composed of investor-owned utilities that in the event of an emergency, disaster, come together and provide resources to other utilities in time of need. So we are a member of the North Atlantic Mutual Assistance Group, which is composed of members, obviously in the North Atlantic, predominantly the North Mid-Atlantic states, all the way up through New England, all the way up into Canada. So it was the All Hazards Consortium and the SISE Working Group and the Fleet Response Working Group. We've been a big supporter of them for quite a long time. It was mentioned again at our meeting by Vince Cachet, who is from PPL and is exiting as one of our officers, but also reiterated by myself out the All Hazards Consortium, and to sign on, that there's been a new vetting process for people to be able to go in and sign on to keep informed on all the different topics as an industry or government stakeholder. And when I sent people to the All Hazards Consortium website, it was not, first feedback, it was not easy to find the sign-in page, okay? You actually had to go to the Michael Storm, go all the way down to the bottom of it, click on a link, which then brought you to the SISE.USA.org Stay Connected page. So a suggestion, if you could, maybe get that, confirm your information below where you go in and put your email address and your name. Bring that someplace where it's a little more prominent or easier for people to find. That's the first bit of feedback. Then originally I had gotten involved with this whole endeavor as part of the Fleet Response Working Group several years ago. The couple of the mission was to, work together, private sector and public, to expedite fleet movement and supply chain and resources across state borders in response to major disasters. The SISE kind of grew out of the Fleet Response Working Group. Two of the things that were worked on early on were the Canadian border crossing issues and process, and as well as the EZPASS toll stations. So it pains me to say this, but they are not functioning as they should be. Okay, the Canadian border crossing process continues to be difficult and an endeavor. I don't even know what it would be like if we needed to go on and support our friends and fellow utilities to the north. But for having them come down to us, it seems New England has worked out a great process. The New England process seems to work. Yet we had a U.S. Border Patrol supervisor present at our meeting, and it was communicated to us that there is no consistency between field offices, so that the Boston field office, which controls the Northeast or New England crossings, may have one process, but the Buffalo field office follows a different process. Me, as a taxpayer, that's unacceptable. I think that there should be consistency across the entire border, that all processes need to be applied the same. So I think that that's something that needs to be looked at go back and look upon. Again, the New England crossing seems to be working better, but the crossings in New York, and again, I don't even know what the crossings are, what the process is for Michigan, because that's out of our RMAG jurisdiction, but they might even be different as well. This needs to be looked at again. I believe that Glenn Eichinger, I don't want to speak for him, he's not on the call, but I know that him and I were discussing it, and he said he does need to get back involved in this. I'd be happy to get back involved in this as well, but we also need to look at it and fix it. And then it was brought to our attention that apparently with the EZPASS process, that is only suitable for vehicles in the U.S., that those vehicles that are coming from Canada cannot partake of that EZPASS process for whatever reason. I'm not really sure what it is. And that seems to be the biggest obstacle. You have these utility crews, contractors, as well as utility companies coming in from Canada. They don't have American money, or they may not have American money. And for them to then pass through a toll station, it is not quite simple. It's not easy for them to do that. Whereas if they were able to have that EZPASS transponder and put their Canadian vehicle license plates listed on that account, it should be able to read the license plate, and be able to post the toll when they come through. So, and they do provide resources, and they do respond. We were talking with some folks from New Brunswick, Canada, and they were all the way down in Florida during Irma last year, and they were down there for Florence in South Carolina and North Carolina, and for Michael in Georgia this past September. So it is an ongoing issue. So I just need to bring that up to you all, Tom, and also for our friends over at EEI, that this is something that still needs to be worked on. It's not working as it's supposed to be working.
Jeff, thanks for that feedback. That's exactly what we need. Okay, you've hit it right on the head. Everything you said is accurate. I just took some notes. The challenge with the EZPASS piece is most of the United States EZPASS stations are using, I say most, are using the video, take pictures of the plate kind of thing, and then track it back. They don't track back into the Canadian DOTs. So to fix this, it's just going to take some focused attention and bandwidth, right, to come up with a process of how we do it. And we need agreement from the EZPASS group. Now, the good news is we know people that run the EZPASS group. There could be several solutions to this, but this is just going to be a bandwidth issue. If we're going to do it, we're going to have to commit some resources to do it. That's all. The U.S.-Canadian border process, the U.S.-Canadian border crossing process, Mike Mingus, Mike Zappone, and I have been working on that. This is going to be Mike Mingus, I don't want to speak for EEI, just from my perspective. To get multiple field offices on the same page is going to take much higher authority than we have in this group, and probably we're going to need to circle back to our friends at the White House, Mike, to convene a meeting between USDOT, Customs Border Protection, and federate some type of agreement. So that's not going to be anytime soon. That's going to be well, I don't want to put a timeline on it, but it's not a 30-day cycle. But I think you're right. We got to address this. So, Mike Mingus, I'll let you.
I would say, Tom, if you want to also loop in Glenn Eisinger from National Grid, I know that he's kind of has a foot on both sides, because National Grid has resource requests coming into New England, and that would be passing the Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine borders, as well as New York, that would also be coming in on the northern New York, from both Quebec and Ontario, as well as Buffalo, across that across the Niagara River over there, and coming into the western portion of the state. So Glenn is very aware of both processes.
Good.
Okay, and he knows the person from the Buffalo field office.
Okay.
So,
good. Mike?
Yeah, hey, Jeff. So actually, we just reached out this morning. Coincidence that you brought that up with the gentleman from the Boston office, and we're going to be coordinating a meeting with the different sector offices along the border. What we did was we prioritized what sector offices we want to start with based off of mutual assistance, so that the highest influx of mutual assistance comes, through the New York, the Northeast corridor. So those are the ones we want to focus on first. Then the next highest priority that we identified was on the West Coast. So we have that process. We're trying to get that process in place. I agree with Tom. We have to take a parallel approach to this. One is, let's work directly with the sector offices, but in parallel, let's work through the White House as well, and take a parallel approach. Because I agree with Tom, getting all the sector offices to agree to the same process could be a challenge, but we're on it, and I'm going to loop in Glenn when we set up that first meeting, because that Buffalo was one of the ones that we identified as high priority. So I'll definitely make sure we loop in. Yep.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, I think Glenn's big fear and concern is that we don't go back and change the New England process out of the Boston field office, because it's functioning well. And yet, Buffalo said, "Oh, well, no, you can't submit that. That's not the spreadsheet we use. This is the spreadsheet we use." And literally, it was I think, 3 columns that might have been different in addition or just in the wrong column location.
Yeah.
And no, you can't use that. You got to use this one.
Yeah.
To me, that doesn't sound very efficient.
Yeah, and that's what we want to do is we're going to start with the Boston office. We have their process, and our intent is to go to the other sector offices, bringing the Boston representative along with us and see if we can influence some change.
Sounds good.
So Jeff,
and Tom, if the reason I brought it up is I don't know if it's necessary, but we haven't had an FRWG meeting in a while. I don't know if it's necessary, but maybe it's something to have a quick fleet response working group conference call to discuss some of these and get feedback from some of the other folks as well. I don't know.
got it. Yeah, Mike and I were just talking about that. This could be the bone to chew on for that exact thing, right? Also, for everybody on the call, I don't want to be too hard on the regions. This is very indicative of when there is no process, the regions work on getting a process in place, right? This is not just within CBP. This is a lot of organizations, public and private. I think we do have an opportunity, though, to streamline it. And when we say White House, we work with the White House Office of Science Technology Policy. They are wonderful to work with. They got us into the right people at USDOT now that has produced all kinds of information and data sets. For example, the one we're working on now is a database of all bridges across and tunnels updated across that are under standard height, right? This has been a tough one to maintain, but they're working with us to do that now. Alex Appel is working with us from there. So I think we're going to have to do the same thing to Mike's point. We're going to have to run parallel paths. But Jeff, thanks for the feedback. I've made notes. I will follow up on this. Mike, maybe this is one of the, we put on our weekly calls on Wednesday. We bring the right people together for that because it's electric sector focused. And we start working it on Wednesdays for a few minutes on that agenda. I think it would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree, and that'll help push it forward.
Okay. And as far as the EZPASS component of that, let me follow up with the EZPASS group, and maybe we can pull an effort together on the same thing, because that's been nagging Jeff for a while, right? We didn't know Canadian we didn't know the Canadian vehicles was an issue until we were well into the process, right? We have a lot of companies in the U.S. have signed up for that process, right? But the Canadian vehicles is still a challenge, and it's just because the databases in Canada for traffic or for DOT vehicle stuff is not integrated with U.S. DOT, right? But there's got to be a way around it. So, good.
Well, but the point, Tom, I mean, I don't want to belabor this, but the point is, if a Canadian company gets an EZPass transponder and they list the Canadian license plates on the EZPass account that's with that transponder, it should see that license plate. It's part of the account. It should say, okay, you're good to go. I mean, a license plate is it's a plate. So it's odd. It doesn't need to go back into. I don't think it's going back into Canadian, DOT to check to make sure it's a legit plate. Maybe it is. I don't know. That's beyond my scope of understanding what it does, but. So it doesn't seem like it should need it.
Well, we know the people. We'll pull them together, and we'll find out what is the art of the possible. Okay. Once we know what that field is, then we'll get creative on how better to resolve it. Right. There are paid solutions that solve this today. Okay, but it requires a transponder on every vehicle. There's a fee for that, and they go across U.S.-Canadian border, and they go across all toll systems in America, right? But it's a paid solution. There's several of them, and maybe that is the way we have to go. Ultimately, I don't know, but we'll begin working the issue. Okay. Awesome.
Sounds good.
No, good feedback, and we'll have the registration button big and bulky on the homepage today. Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah. Yeah, I sent a bunch of folks to it, and they were like, I can't find it.
All right.
Talking about the sign
Well, every button on that homepage points them to that form, but I think we have to be like, register here, right? We have to make it really big. No problem. We'll fix it.
Yeah, well, the first link that takes you to SISE USA isn't working. It's broken. You click on it and it gets you to gives you a 404 error.
All right, stand by. I'm checking it now. Yeah, okay. It's working now. We had issues. For some reason, we had issues with a web server. It's working now. If you go to siseusa.org, it brings you right in. We just had. I think we had. I think we had server issue. I just typed it in. So let me try it in another window.
No, when you type it in, but there's when it says Meet the All Hazards Consortium,
Yeah.
and it says Learn How, Get Started. When you click that Get Started, the URL isn't formatted appropriately.
Okay, we'll run it down. We'll run it
Yeah,
down.
no problem. If you got any questions, hit me up later, and I'll snap.
Okay.
I'll snap it and I'll send it to you in an email.
Okay, you got it. Good. All right, we're up at a little past the hour. Any other comments or questions before we adjourn? Okay. Great call. Good discussion. Everybody have a safe, happy weekend, and we will talk next week. Okay? Thanks, everybody.